and also medical director of a health center that's in the Middleton Hardware Secure Facility for DYS. So I take care of those young men that can't come and go, as we can. And I'm also co-director of the Wellness Collaborative, which is a nonprofit here in Roxbury, right in Torrance Firehouse. And we are an educational nonprofit that really is looking to change the way people think about health and wellness. Because as we saw in the movie, sometimes you gotta ask the right questions. You can't just consign yourself to folks and say, do what you want. Y'all the expert. No, we're all experts. We're now helping others. So I'm gonna ask the panelists to introduce themselves. Just for everything is helpful for people to know about you. I should say I'm a mother of 4 and grandmother of 10. Maybe I should start with that.
Hi everyone, my name is Asenso. I am a doula in the Central Massachusetts area. I'm in Worcester right now. I am the executive director of Accompany Doula Care, that is a nonprofit in Massachusetts, based in Boston, and we provide free doula care to high-risk families. And our model is a bit different, so we partner with healthcare providers, insurance providers, and they give us referrals to work with families. I became a doula as a second career in the middle of COVID when no one knew what to do. I am a mother of 5 children, 2 that are alive. I've had 3 losses in a matter of 5 years. So I have 2 beautiful girls now and have had the unfortunate journey of going through 3 losses at different times. The last one was just a couple of months away. And I love what I do. I became a doula, I tell people, by fate, by accident, but it brings me joy, and I believe in the circle of life, both birth and death, and I feel like it's really, truly the most vulnerable moment you'll ever have in your life. And I have decided to dedicate my life to helping people navigate that journey.
Hello everyone, my name is Emmai Alaquiva. I consider myself a cinematic poet instead of a filmmaker. I tell stories and really hold narratives that are safe to me, safe to my heart, and generations after me. I own a creative agency in Pittsburgh called Your Mom's House. I also serve as the vice chair of the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts under Governor Josh Shapiro. And I worked on the Ebony Canal film over the course of 2 years, following 4 amazing women from conception, the whole entire pregnancy, all the way up to the child's very first birthday. And it was a lot for me because I learned a lot about myself as a Black man. I learned that my wife was a twin, and she lost her twin during pregnancy. I learned that my mother had complications during her pregnancy with me. And it was just really a discovery that I had to crystallize the human spirit through cinematic and purposeful storytelling. So when you see the Ebony Canal, and why I called it the Ebony Canal, is because ebony, of course, being a dark shade or a dark brown. The canal, the double entendre, when you connect one body of life to another body of life, and then also the canal of Black women, which Black women are the portals of humanity. I strongly believe that, and it's scientifically proven. And over this course, I reminded myself as a Black man, it's important to protect Black and brown women. And I'm not the biggest tough guy. I'm not walking around, hitting the gym 3 times a day. But I will try my very best to protect Black and brown women through a very artistic lens and storytelling. And I just found out so much with this film. And a lot of people ask me, how did you deal with your mental health dealing with this process. And I said, when you write a love letter to Black and brown women, and you look at what Black and brown women have been through, you have no time to complain. Like, who am I to complain for what Black and brown women have been through? So that's kind of what it is. That's my introduction. And also something odd about me, my favorite cereal is Captain Crunch Berries.
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Becky Cruz Crosson. I'm the Division Director for Healthy Start Systems at the Boston Public Health Commission. I oversee the maternal child division there. I am a native of Boston. I identify as an Afro-Latina, born and raised in Boston, and much of the work that we do is really focused on addressing health inequities, disparities for families who have children up to the age of 5 in the city of Boston.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Stephanie Johnson. I am the founder, midwife of Midwifery, a homework midwifery practice in the Boston area. I came to this space a long journey, but I'll give it a short version. I wanted to be able to connect with the people that I worked with, and I did not think that I would be able to do that in a hospital setting. I wanted the clients that I work with, their voices to be heard. I wanted them to feel like they were valued. I wanted them to have a connection with not just myself, but also having that trusting relationship so that as we're going through this journey from the beginning of their pregnancy through their postpartum period, that they became almost like family. And 5 years in, that is exactly what I've built over the years. So, it's definitely not mainstream, although COVID kind of put it out there a little bit more because people didn't have, were more so scared of being in a hospital setting. But it also changed the tide so that people started looking into other options. And since then, we kind of hit the ground running. And so here we are, 5 years in, about 275 plus babies. And one of the, I can't remember if it was your documentary or the Doula documentary where they mentioned, walking in your community and seeing these babies. And that's what I'm doing now, so it's great to see.
Thank you. So I have another question for you as the director. You actually already answered the question that I was going to ask about how you came into this work. And it seems like your experience is always the best way to enter work, through some experience. When you were putting the film together, when you were interviewing women, even before that, even when you began to think about the concept of getting this occurred, what was it that you had hoped, even at that time, that folks watching it would get? And I'm sure it changed as you make the movie, right? Things morph. But what was that one thing that you would hope that people would take away from this work of art?
Well, the fact that, we all know the statistics. Black women are 3 times more likely to die during childbirth than their counterparts. Black babies are, 2.5 times more likely to die before their first birthday. Those numbers really spoke to me. And, just a little bit of a backstory. My daughter's now 13, but when she was 8, I had to explain who George Floyd was because she goes to a PWI, predominantly white institute, and a lot of people were just, talking to her about this situation. So when she came home, I had to repeat George Floyd 5 times. And I said, do you know who that is? She said, no, but I heard of him. So what I did is I wanted us to do an activity where her and I were on the same wavelength. So we started doing sign language together. So when we started learning American Sign Language, she started to really enjoy it. And then when I started to take photography of the George Floyd protest, one day I brought the photos home and the videos, and she said, "Dad, there's no one with a disability or doing ASL in any of your work." And she was 8, right? So that sat with me as a father. So me and her, we stayed up that night and we wrote a PSA, Black Lives Matter PSA to the deaf and hard of hearing community. And at 8, she was featured on Good Morning America, and she realized her voice. And she found her voice as an advocate and an ally. So she inspired me to start doing these types of stories. So I did a story called Optic Voices, in which I interviewed a lot of the top mothers who lost their sons to police brutality. That was that, and then the very next project was the Ebony Canal. And I said, I'm okay with telling uncomfortable stories in order for us to get to the next level. So what I want people to take away is that the 3 H's, and you saw it in this film, there's the hurt, there's the healing, but there's the hope. So there's a reason why at the end, when you see the birthday parties of these children, the film is in color, not in black and white. The metaphor for this film being in black and white is because we are black and white spaces. So it's very poetic. Again, I told you at the top, I'm a cinematic poet. I'm not a filmmaker. So when you see the mothers swimming in the water, the ballet of the water, we are all born in water. But you see, it might look ugly, it might feel ugly, but it's the sign of growth, and it's the sign of the birth to come. So I thought about all of these things. And at the end of the film, I encourage you to be a vessel, because it's going to take all of us to be a vessel, despite the undercurrents, pun intended, that black and brown women are into. We can be a vessel to change the world.
I like that sense. Poet that works with every sense that we have. Now, I know when I watched Teddy first, so we don't have anyone here representing from that particular film. But I know when that baby came out, I just started crying. I don't know if that happens to everybody else. As a pediatrician, but when I was in residency, I was at the delivery. I was the person on call to make sure those newborns were okay, and they would call me in if there was any concern. But if I was in there when the baby popped out, I just would start crying. Dr. Callahan, you cannot start crying. You need to see what you're doing. But the emotion of a new life coming in. And so this is for the doulas in the room. I know you have your own experience in your practice, but when you were watching the film, either one, what were you feeling at the time? What was it, a technical thing? Oh, but she shouldn't have been doing rubber on that. She should actually come on the other side. or do you connect even with the stories that we saw in this film? What was your reaction to that?
That's interesting. I usually try and watch things without bias. So with the first one, I remember really intentionally looking at it through the eyes of the family and not the doula. So I was listening to what the parents were saying. I was listening to what her partner was saying, right? And I was connecting with those words. I didn't necessarily look at Teddy. And the first thing that was, I don't know if it was the choice of words, but his first sentence was, I just know that I'm a safe space, right? That is very intentional. That is powerful. And for him to acknowledge that, for me, made me feel safe. I knew everything was great, right? And when I was watching your film, it took me through all my journey, but also with families that I have been with. And I have always told people that I've never, ever thought that I was going to die in childbirth, because I knew people looked up to me. And I knew that my mouth would always speak, but that's who I am. And I know there are people out there who could not advocate for themselves. And because I have lost children, I've always been very intentional about looking at babies when I see films, to see how is the baby doing. Because I know that that is not always the case for them to see their one baby. So that took me through that journey. But also, I remember there was a point where one of the mothers was talking about how she was diagnosed at 14, and I had a client who I just supported who called me 2 weeks ago when she was in labor and said, somebody told me to call you, I'm in labor. And I was like, okay, everything okay? And it was just, she had a doula, her doula had another birth, and she was freaking out. And she was like, I don't have anyone, and I don't know what to do. And I said, who gave you my number? And she said, a friend of mine. And it was a past client of mine. And I was like, I'll see you, I'll be right there. And I dropped everything and I went. And after she had a birth, her story was just the same. She never thought she would have babies. And for her freaking out was because she had a dream the day before that her baby wasn't going to make it. And all I did was sit there that night. I didn't touch her. She didn't want to be touched. I literally just sat there the entire time. And we were playing music and playing Monopoly. I don't know how to play Monopoly. I taught myself that day. Right? So sometimes as doulas, people think that there's unicorn that come into the space and do kumbaya and do all these things. No. Sometimes just sitting there knowing your safe space is enough. And that birth taught me that again, because I'm so used to going in there, knowing who the families are, having some kind of history with them. I knew nothing about this person. Absolutely nothing. All I knew that she was alone and she needed somebody. And that's why I came into this work, to be there for somebody. So watching your film for me was just like, I could see myself in a lot of these women, and I could see my friends in them. I could see people that I have supported in them. And these are not just stories, these are real life. These are people that have gone through things. And I've had a premature baby. My first live baby came at 32 weeks in COVID, in 2020. So I have been there where I saw premature babies. I fired 3 doctors before I finally got the doctor that I like. Like I said, this mouth of mine will always get me in trouble. But I live in Worcester, and before I lived in Boston, and I knew for sure that I wasn't going to make it to Boston to have my baby, because my babies come quick. Like when that first contraction, if you don't catch my baby, there's a problem. My babies come quick. So I knew I wasn't going to make it to Boston. I just knew it. No one had to tell me. And my husband was like, okay, we're going to be in Worcester. The first doctor, he didn't listen to me. It's normal, based on your history, it's normal. And I was like, I know my body. This isn't normal for me. So he had to go. And then I got another one. And it was the exact same thing. We've seen your chart, everything looks great. And I said, absolutely not. I have a headache. And I know I have headaches. I'm allergic to chocolates and I get headaches. I didn't eat anything. It's normal, we'll run some blood tests. Forgot to put in the order for the blood test, so he had to go. Then I called my OB in Boston and I said, I can't make it to you. So I need you to find me somebody here, and I can't find somebody who looks like me. So who can you find me in Worcester, because I live 5 minutes from UMass, that I can go to? And she found me the best person. And the first time I sat in this office, this lady sat me down. It was an hour-and-a-half conversation. She listened to everything. I saw her on a Monday, and I told her, my baby is going to come early, and I can't tell you why. I was 31 weeks. She said, come in on Thursday, and let's do some ultrasounds. I came in on Thursday, everything was fine. And I said, my baby's going to come early, and she said, I know, but let's give it a couple more weeks. My baby came on Sunday. And it was just me trusting my gut, me knowing how to talk and advocate for myself. And not a lot of people can do that.
Repeat the question. I I'm like,
Yes, I
oh.
don't even know if I can answer the question. What was your experience watching these, televised live, and did you watch it as a doula relating to the doula? How did you relate? Who did you relate to? What did you experience while you were watching? Either one.
Yeah, so similar to Adwapa, connecting with the women in there because those are the same people that I work with every day. When women come to me for a consult, they're usually coming because they either had bad experiences with their current provider. If this is their first baby, they are afraid, and they voice that all the time. I don't want to die. Or they've had family or friends that have had bad experiences, and so they either don't want to have that same experience or they don't want to die. Unfortunately, this is sort of the narrative that is in our community of we can't have healthy pregnancies and births and postpartum periods. And so they gravitate to a lot of that until they find the right way. And so like with you, finding that person who connects with you, that listens to you, that when you said, no, whatever you're testing or whatever you're supposed to do doesn't sit right with what I feel intuitively, that is the difference between what that provider may do and what I would do. Because for me, I'm not just looking at just the numbers, I'm looking at the whole person. I'm looking at, what is this mom saying to me or woman saying to me? What is her story, if you will? Because yes, the labs can absolutely give you all that detail, but that person is also telling you something that they either feel, that they experience, that they're come across in some way. The other part is knowing that I know my client when I'm working with them. So like we have hour-long appointments, so it's not rushed. It's not, let's kind of do a heartbeat and a blood pressure. Let's talk. What is going on in your day? What's going on in your world? What is happening in your relationship? What is going on with your kids? They're welcome to come to the office. The kids love me. I love them. They become my little assistants because they get to do the blood pressure and the fetal heart tones. And so we're not strangers. And so that trusting relationship gets built from day one, and it creates that safe space for people. And so even in the moments which don't happen often, but they do happen, where a transfer would happen, they still feel prepared. They are not going in blindly of this kind of unfamiliar space. We have talked about it, we have gone through the what ifs, the what have you, the communication continues, all of those things. So when I see that video, I'm well aware of all the statistics. I'm well aware of what people are feeling. I'm well aware of sort of the outcomes of when you don't get listened to or when things go wrong. But for me, that is the fuel of how I do care. So that is my foundation of, I don't want to be the provider that doesn't listen. I don't want to be the provider that made you feel rushed or felt like your word wasn't valued or your intuition wasn't valued, etc. And that's just kind of the foundation of how I do care.
Thank you.
Well, I'm not a doula.
No, I know
but
you're not. I was going to preface. I want you to say again what you do in this state, in this, in terms of what you bring to the conversation, and then your impressions. And is this information we're getting from this artistic style film? Is it making a difference in policy? Is it getting to the ears of those who really need to hear it? We are really good at diagnosing, and I love that there was some time spent in the end of the film that talked about what we would need to do. I just want to hear your perspective on all of that.
Yeah, I think a couple of things stood out for me. My initial reactions to it, there was the sadness, of course, when you think of loss, and joy, so I also saw the joy for the first time moms. So those were like my initial feelings as I was watching this. And it also just kind of invigorated the work that we do at our division for me. And in my role, much of what we're doing is making sure that Black and brown mothers, birthing people have access to those services. And our division recently received a federal grant that has allowed us to give access to those particular populations with no cost. And so when we talk about the work, we're all literally connected in the work, which is, I'm so grateful to be on this panel with these beautiful women and the work that they're doing, because they help to make our work easier. And so my role, I see my role is just like, how do we bridge those gaps? How are we filling those gaps? How are we getting the resources to make sure that our families are getting that? So dad doulas, making sure that our families have access to doulas, making sure that they get access to public health nurses and social workers and community health workers to help them navigate those systems. So in this film, I just think really is great. I mean, I think it depicts all of why we're here today and the work that we do. My hope is that others will support this film, right? But also that on a federal level, with everything that's happened federally, that philanthropists would get behind some of this stuff when it comes to maternal child health. We know what's going on a federal level, and I think the more the story is told to the right individuals, the work, we need to keep this at the forefront, because of all the noise, all the static, Black and brown women will continue to be marginalized and ignored if these stories don't continue to be told. So thank you so much for sharing their stories, because there are hundreds of them, thousands of them, right, that haven't been told. So I just hope that the stories will continue to get told, and that we're able, on a city level, I will say that they have been able to give funding to expand access to a lot of these services, which I'm grateful for. And so much of the work that we do is to give wraparound services to families. So fathers are involved, mom is taken care of, and we continue to address social determinants of health, so food insecurity, housing instability. That's all the work that we do within our division, and I will just continue to advance that work in our city.
Wow, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Oh, that's okay. I got a tap on my shoulder because we want to be able to hear any questions from the audience. First of all, I want to see how many mothers are in the room. How many kind of remember going through that? So any questions from, and fathers, I'm sorry, any fathers in the room? Okay, I'm okay. Any questions from you guys? This was rich.
Excellent documentary. Stephanie, I knew your journey, and we're going to continue to do some work. My journey is not done, but as of 2020, what I just saw as a grandmother of a 5-year-old and 6-year-old, and the difference wasn't different from my daughter's oldest daughter at 19. That if I wasn't a voice for my daughter, the last two would not have been alive. Or had she not listened to me, because you know something they get wrong. So she was a teen mom, and then she's an adult mom, and nothing, and I said, this is scary. Really nothing has changed. From 2006 to 2020, it still very much happens. So advocacy is so important. Unofficially, I helped catch 23 babies. At some point before I leave this planet, it will say doula on my headstone, and through Stephanie, I know what's gonna happen. But just being a voice especially for these teen moms, because they're looking at them as, oh, they're just fresh and how do you even get in this position, that kind of thing. But they're still a human being, and they took the charge and responsibility of carrying a life. So let's treat them as a person and not a number. So how do we, in the state of Massachusetts, get behind this film and continue to promote advocacy? So like I said, Stephanie and I will talk offline at some point. But I say it's hot. I'm hot, but I'm not going to miss this, and I'm so glad that I made it down here. So thank you so much.
So was it?
Your question is how do we locally, to support this film, and so I need to talk to Stephanie about showing this film at some point. I'm talking to him, whoever the father. Excellent, as a father, that's on point. That you saw that, like you feel a lens through your wife's lens, and sometimes the men are left out of the room, and they need to be in the room because they were in the room when the child was being created. So like something's wrong with this picture.
No, absolutely. We made sure that there was a section of fathers. Lamar Rucker had a very difficult time with his firstborn child, in which while they were treating his wife, the doctor told him to step out, and we'll let you know when you come back in. And he's like, wait, are you kidding me right now? And they dismissed him, and he felt, strongly about that, fathers are sometimes pushed to the side and say, hey, for this 9 months, we got to deal with this. We'll get with you later. Thanks for your contribution. But it really takes fathers. And last week, I was on Capitol Hill speaking with Charles Johnson from For Care for Moms. He created a program called For Care for Dads. And if you don't know the story, Kara died during childbirth at Senior Sinai in LA. So he turned into a whole beast. So to be able to take that journey and to be able to speak on Capitol Hill with this film in mind, I would have never thought. But that is what we have to do. And my last point to land the plane is, it's going to take all of us, white, black, you name it, Latina, purple, red, whatever, which is why, I have individuals that are advocates. Advocate comes from a Greek root word called avocare. And avocare just means to add a voice. We need all of you to add a voice, and I think that's what we need to do for your district.
I just want to add on to what you were saying about what the role is that we have. My name is Vivian, and I was born at home 62 years ago, not intended. My parents were Puerto Rican. My father was black Puerto Rican, my mother was white. They had no phone. She went next door to borrow the phone. My dad was at work to let them, to call the paramedics. The woman did nothing to help my mom because she saw my mother as a white person, right? So anyway, I was born, that's why my name is Vivian. I don't know why, but I'd always had this fascination with childbirth. When I was in high school, that's what I wrote my term paper about. So let's speed it up. I worked at a public hospital in El Paso, which is where I'm from, for 11 years. And I would go into the delivery room whenever I had a chance. I got to know a lot of the nurses, midwives, and things like that. So I was always really, really interested in that. I don't have any babies of my own. But while I was there, I had experiences because I was responsible for volunteers, that sometimes when the baby was about to be born and it was a fetal demise, they knew that the baby was not going to live. Religious individuals would not always be open to coming in and meeting with the mother. So very long story short, when I was a doula for a night with this mom who was having a baby that was not going to live, and she had so many questions, right? I have always wanted to, so I'm gonna connect with you because it's something like you on your headstone. But this is the way I see it. I went to, when I was in New York City going to grad school, I learned something that was really important, and I hope not to offend, but I don't come from a unionized setting. So unionized medicine was very like, no, you cannot do this if it's not in your contract. So when I was in El Paso, oh my God, I knew everything about that hospital. So when I was doing my cultural competency study at a public hospital in New York, it was extremely difficult to get anybody to help me, especially if you were a person who was not raised in this country and English was not the language that you spoke. So what I try to do here is if I'm in a setting and there are folks that speak Spanish, and I will always ask them, when you go into the doctor's office, do you ask for somebody that speaks Spanish or whatever language it may be? Oftentimes, they don't know that that's a right that they have. So we are the ones that are responsible for making sure that our neighbors know that they need to ask for that. I had a terrible fall 3 years ago. I was in the hospital in New York City for 3 months, right? I was advocating for the patients next to me and getting in trouble because HIPAA would not allow me to ask the question. Folks don't know what to ask. So we need to do a better job of asking them, volunteering and saying, look, these are the things that you need to know. Because it's not that they don't want to ask, they don't know what to ask, all right? So all of us play a role in it. Just ask people, do you need any help? How can I help you? And you just, the feeling that you're going to get and the feeling that that person is going to get because of the fact that you cared enough to ask is what we need to do. So thank you.
I think we can take Mary's 4 and then, yeah.
Hi, my question is for the doula. I don't want to mispronounce your name. Can you say it again?
Adwapa.
Adwapa. You talked about your intuition and trusting your gut when it came to advocating for yourself, and I imagine for your clients as well. I'm curious in your work, if it comes up and if it does, how you support folks who aren't in touch with their bodies, who I think culturally, particularly in this country, we live very disembodied lives. We ignore our body's cues, and birth is a space and a time to know what our body is telling us. And so I think for me, as someone who wants to dive deeper into birth work and supporting folks, what does it look like to support someone who can't say, this headache isn't a chocolate headache, it's a something else headache? So I'm just curious about how you respond to those.
Great question. So I became this way. It was a long story, and it was actually my husband who pointed to me that I knew my body. Because I say a lot of things, which sometimes are not always true. Okay, that's a lie. 99.9% is true. But what I tell my clients to do is to really just think deep and start to journal. So for the first couple of things, write whatever comes to your mind, right? And it's just really, a lot of things are mental and emotional. So I approach birth as an emotional state because the pain is going to be there, right? And if you want to address the pain, there are ways to do that. But if you decide you don't want any pain medication, which is either an epidural or another form of pain medication, there are ways to go about it. So I go through the emotional state. Because what we can guarantee is that you're going to go through all the emotions you've ever felt. You're going to be sad. You're going to be frustrated. You're going to be happy. Those are emotions you felt before. And then what I tell the partners is, how do you usually support somebody if they're sad? What do you do? And then I ask the mothers, when you are sad, what do you like someone to do for you to feel comforted? When you're frustrated, because there will be a time where you will be frustrated, especially through transition. When you're like, I can't do it anymore, that baby's about to come. What do you want someone to do for you? And that's how I go through it with my clients. And that's how I go through it for myself. Now, how do you get connected with your body? The old school way is to journal. You talk about your day. And then not just journal and put it aside, but then you go back and you read it. And you find what is the common things going through it. So for me, I started to journal a lot. And it would be like, I ate this morning, and everybody knows this about my life. I'm always constipated, like my entire life. But then I started to journal things, and it was like, as a kid, if I poop, it's on the calendar. Like everybody in the house is having a celebration. And then slowly, we start to figure out, what did I eat? What did I not eat? And that's how I started to get to know what my body does, and then I react. And then I do also experiment. Okay, let's try to do this and see if it continues to go. So that's the same way I approach when I talk to my families. Let's journal your day. When you were pissed off, how did you feel? Who pissed you off? What triggered you? Right? So those are the things that you start to do to get to know what your body is doing. And you start with yourself before you can start working with others. And then you call your friends and you do the same thing with your friends. But that's really how I go about it.
Thank you.
Good evening. One, I want to thank you, filmmaker, but you're film poet, for your work. Ebony, thank you. Thank you for your work. I just really quickly on my experience as a mom. I was a teen mom, and I was, going to my parents alone, right? My initial doctor, at one point, I took some tests and it was like, your results show that your child is going to have Down syndrome. From there, I was doing a whole lot of genetic testing, but there was no real explanation of, how and why that test came back that way. However, my child was not born with Down syndrome. And from there, I had another child at a different hospital with a different doctor. And as you stated, these doctors who listen to you, there are doctors who listen to you, there are doctors who don't. Well, I still see her as my OGYN. However, it was at this particular facility where, they told me not all tests are made for Black and brown people. You will receive wrong results just because of your genetics, period. From there, my third child had, thank God I had all healthy babies, but my third child, he had jaundice really bad. And I got connected with Healthy Baby, Healthy Start after he was born. And so I know about it. However, my question is more so for you, Becky. How do we get the information and the services? How do we share this with individuals, like my former self, because I'm not having more babies, but like my former self, so that they can have, advocates and feel like they have a safe space and a healthy journey to bring a healthy child into this world. Yeah, our services are on, if you go to boston.gov and you look up Healthy Baby, Healthy Child, you will find our services and programs on there. The division is Healthy Start Systems, but our legacy program, as you mentioned, Healthy Baby, Healthy Child has been around since like the late 80s, early 90s. And so for folks that are interested in advocacy, folks that are interested in connecting with resources, I would just direct you guys there. One of our programs to this, I know you had asked around like what is the local work that we can do. We do have a community action network. There are a lot of coalitions in the city that are doing this work and continue to push forward as far as like maternal health is concerned. And as some of you may or may not know, but this past summer, the governor signed a bill that to expand midwifery, access to doula services, and postpartum care. So there's policies that are being implemented, there's state and local level advocacy that's happening. And so if you do want to get connected, again, just boston.gov, search Healthy Baby, Healthy Child. It will direct you to our services, and we can definitely direct you to the right folks to continue to support this work. Thank you.
Let's give a hand praise. I think I'm in church. Let's give a hand. Let's give a shout out for the neighborhood birthing center. There are no birthing centers around anywhere. Okay. And I'm going to shout it out. I know that they had a few challenges as to where, but not the why and when, that we need a birthing center
We need a birthing center. And so I'm going to just shout that out because I was very disheartened when it couldn't happen here, but I know it's going to happen because we need it. So thank you so much for coming. We're going to have official closeout.
Thank you so much for coming. You guys were such troopers. We were sweating. You didn't get to go into the freezer like Susan and I did. Times after you were bussing your tables, but I do appreciate you sticking around, listening to this great panel, watching these great films, and I wish you a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.